Okay, so now we are going to understand a very important part of CSS, which is called length units. So we are writing something called px, which is pixel. I mentioned many times, but I never said that what does this pixel mean, or there are some units, there are some other units, how to use them, something like that. So now we are going to see the length units, but before that there is an important concept called viewport, which will be actually used in some of the units. So let me firstly discuss what is a viewport. A viewport represents the part of the HTML document that is visible in the browser window, which means that if you open a browser, then whatever is the part of the web page which is visible, that is called viewport. So let's say this is Wikipedia page, then this whole thing, see, first of all, this whole thing is a screen. Only a small part of the screen might be my browser, and again in the browser this thing tab and this all thing of window controls of Chrome or any Firefox or any browser that is gone. Whatever is actually the part which is actually the visible part of the website in the browser, visible, which means that there can be some again pages below, in the length, some height of the page can be hidden, but whatever is visible, the part, that part is called viewport. So so let's see here. So this part from here till here, only this part is viewport, not this area, because this area is part of the browser, but that is not showing some document. Now why this is important, because let's say some long document is there, then this can be like, let's say, twice or thrice this height, but still my viewport is whatever is visible. And when I scroll and the lower part comes above, then I say that now that part has become part of our viewport. But the viewport is fixed, whatever is visible, and if I change the browser window, then only viewport size will change, nowhere else, right? So viewport size depends on that, how I am expanding or shrinking the size of the window, so that the visible area of the browser for a particular site is changing or not, and whatever is the final thing right now, that thing is called the viewport. Pretty simple, but it is important. Okay, now let's get into what I was saying, that CSS length units. So right now, definitely the most, there are many types. The most commonly used are something called pixels and rems. So let's discuss what are pixels and rems. Firstly, pixel. Pixel unit is the most popular absolute unit length. Absolute unit length. It is not, actually I will tell you later that it is better to use rem than pixel. So but among absolute lengths, definitely this thing is popular. Now what is another thing? Another thing is font relative. Okay, so what is absolute and what is font relative? Okay, so let me clarify that by an example. When I say this is 25, then this is the size. When I say this is 50, this is the size. So actually this pixel is a fixed thing, and I will tell you how it is calculated later, but it is a fixed thing, and you say that this has to be 25 or 50 pixels, that's it. But what happens that the actual size of 25 pixel can vary depending on the device. So let's say the 25 pixel on desktop is looking this big. 25 pixel on mobile screen might be slightly smaller. So and you don't, and let's say you did not know that, and while you were designing, you were not aware of that or whatever. So there is another unit of uh, length unit in CSS, which is called rem. So I can say, let's say, span, and span font size, let's say I will give 1 rem, and if I refresh, you will see nothing has changed. Actually nothing has changed, because actually the default size, default 1 unit of font size, that is actually rem. And let's say you want to make this 2 times bigger, then you simply make it 2 and it will become 2 times bigger. If you make the 3 times bigger, then you make it 3 and it is 3 times bigger. 3 times of what? 3 times the size of the default font size. So the whole calculation is done with respect to the default font size set by the browser. Okay. So that's what I was discussing here, that pixel is the absolute unit, like 50 means 50, 25 means 25, that's it, right? But these are relative to font relative length units. These are rem and something called em, which I will come to later. These are relative to the font default font in the browser. Now why this is important? See, this is important because let's say some guy wants to see their font slightly bigger in small devices or somewhere. They went into the settings and they changed the font size to, let's say, 1 notch up something. Now if you are using absolute units, then even if that guy has changed, other places it will change, but in your website the fonts will not change, because you are not saying that my size is relative to the default font size what the browser is setting. You are not saying that. You are saying that my is 25. I don't care what is your default. My is 25, and that's why it's not a good practice to use pixels always. There are places where pixel is useful and it is a handy tool to have, but in general, while creating the website, everywhere you should not use pixel. At some places, especially where font sizes are there, especially where you are trying to have the sizes of the div sections or those things definitely should be you should consider using rem also, because these are relative. Now about absolute, let me clarify one more point, that this pixel is one of the absolute length units. There are many others, so for example centimeter, millimeter, inch, point, these things are, but generally these are not used. Mostly pixel is used, that's it. In font relative, these two are there, rem and em, and now let me tell you the difference between them. So basically the em unit represents the calculated font size of the element. So and rem unit represents the font size of the root element. Okay, so now it is trying to say something that, okay, if I am at root, then rem will be there. If I am at somewhere else, then em will take the font size at that location. It will try to understand the em unit. One em unit is how much is the default font size at that place. Now why that can be different? If you didn't change anything, then em and rem will be same everywhere in the document. But let's say in the some internal part of your document you changed your font size. So for example, here I am changing my font size, right? Firstly, let me say that how they are comparable. In general, in most of the browsers, they will have something called 16 pixel for one rem. Like the default font size will be 16, which means, you understand, which means that if I don't do anything, this default is 16, which means that if I do here 16, then see nothing is changed, and if I do here 1 rem, then nothing is changed. You understand? So basically 1 rem is the default size, and generally that is set to be 16 pixel. And that I was saying that if you use 16 pixel, then it will remain 16 pixel. But if somebody, let's say, changed the default font size from 16 to 20, then your 1 rem will become 20, but 16 pixel will remain 16 pixel, and that's why you should use rems for these situations. Anyways, now you understood that everything is fine. Let me tell you what I was saying, that if I am making it 32, you see, that will be equivalent to if I make it 2 rem, because if one rem is 16 by default, then 2 rem will be 32, and you see both sizes are same. So this is what I was saying earlier. Now there is something which I wanted to say, that what is the difference between rem and em. So you see what is there. If I am using span separately and div separately, which means that the default here is whatever 16, the default here is whatever 16, which is 1 rem, and I am saying that this span is twice the root, em, which means that root font size is 16, then twice it is root, which means 32, which means that if I am taking with respect to root, then wherever I move this span, still the size will be 32 only. Why? Because I am not comparing it with respect to any place, I am comparing it with respect to root. Root HTML is 16 pixel, that's it. Now you see that inside this div, I have changed my font size from 16 to 32, which means that inside this div, first div, my font size is not the same as the root ones. Root one was 16, here is 32. Now, if it is EM instead of REM, then try to understand what is happening. If it is EM, then this thing, one EM is not going to be 16. 1 EM is going to be whatever the font size in that context is. So if I moved this span from here to here, understood? So inside div I moved this span. Then on the span, when I am applying 2 EM, then if rem, then it would have been fine, it would have been still 32. But see now what is happening. Now in this context, 1 EM is font size at this place, the default font size. The default font size at this place is actually what I set, 32, which means that 1 EM is 32, which means that 2 EM is 64. And that's why when I will refresh, you will see that Ola is becoming too big, because now it is 64, because it is 2 EM, right? See, if I would have used rem, then it would be still 32, same size, because and that's why I told you that when you are not changing fonts here and there, then you use rem or em, both will give you same answer. But so for example, if you comment this, then you see that this is twice as big. This is twice as big, as simple as that, right? So whether you use EM, then also it is twice as big, or whether you use REM, then also it is twice as big. Similarly, if you simply use one rem, then it is equal, or 1 EM, then also it is equal. You understood, right? But if it is changing, then now I am saying that okay, if I am using REM, which means that my this thing is 32, but span is with respect to root 16, and that thing is 16, and that's why it is 16. But if I use EM, then I am saying that okay, not with respect to root. Right now it is 32, mine is also same as 1 unit of that thing, and that's why it will be equal, you see. And if you do something like 2, so it will be double that size. And if it is 2 REM, then from 16 the root it is calculation is 32, and here itself the calculation is 32, and that's why in that sense both will be equal. So long way of saying that this thing is important to understand, because many people don't understand it really. So if you understand it, you will be very comfortable in units of various units of CSS. Now I wanted to show you some other unit, which is actually viewport percentage length unit, and that's why I discussed what is viewport. Now you fairly in a good way you understand that what is viewport. Let me tell you two units, which is VH and VW. VH is basically a unit which accounts for 1% of viewport's height, which means that if you write somewhere 10 VH, which means that viewport's height, and take that viewport height and give me 10% of that. If you write 50, then take the viewport height and give me 50% of that. This might be useful, right? So for example, let's say whatever this hello Ola is written, that is fine, but you know what, its height is not that good, right? So let's say this div, whatever this div, I want to set its height, and we will discuss height properties later. But see, all these color, font size, height, all this we will discuss separately. But these things are and font size, these things are pretty like straightforward. You don't need like much brain to understand these things. That's why I'm taking always the example of these 3-4 only, because I have not discussed all the properties as such. I'm just trying to give you a feel of CSS right now. Okay, so height is what? Height is, I told you that okay, I can give height like 50 pixel or whatever. So this is 50. I can give height 80 pixel. That is fine. But what if my requirement is not absolute like 80 pixels, 70 pixels? My requirement is actually whatever is the whole viewport height. Can you give me 50% of that, half of that? Now that can be done by how? That can be done by actually having that VH unit. So 1 VH means what? 1%. We discussed, right? VH is 1%. I want 50%, so let's write 50 VH. And when you refresh, you get half of that. Understand? Actually, we'll discuss something about the margin padding. Actually, this gap is there, that is not counted. So whatever is the whole this blue part, teal part, aqua is the color actually. So whatever is this aqua color part is there, that thing is actually half of the whole part, half of the whole which is viewable, that part. Okay. And the same thing will happen. So right now, you know, all the divs by default take the whole width, but I can say that no. You know what? My width should be only let's say 40% of the viewport width. So you see, VW is the viewport width and 1% is 1 unit. So if I write 40 VW, then it is 40%. And if you refresh, then it's like 40%. You see, it is 40% of the whole width. If I want 75%, then it will be 75%. Straightforward. You understood? So you understood that how all these various units are there. There are many other units, but actually these are the most popular ones, and that's why I'm not going to discuss some others. And mostly like 95% of the cases, wherever you see, these things will be used. And then definitely we can Google together if something new comes up, but definitely most of the times we will be using, and everywhere else only these things are used. Okay, so in summary, pixel, we already know that it is a absolute length unit. However, don't confuse pixel with pixel on your screen. Actually, pixel name was given traditionally to represent 1 pixel of your screen, but right now the modern devices are having too much high resolution, right? So actually 1 pixel and 1 pixel in CSS terms might have many pixels in the width of 1 pixel. So actually the modern definition is this thing, that 1 by 96th of an inch, 1 by 96th of an inch, let's say this is a screen, so 1 inch, take 1 by 96th of that thing is 1 pixel, which means that 96 pixels will make 1 inch. Okay, so that is the length. However, 1 by 96th, you might have guessed that always I am writing 32, 50, 40, but I can pretty much write 32.5 pixel, and that this thing is also fine. Understand? Slightly it just became bigger, you might have observed. So the thing is that it can be decimal values, all the length units can be decimal value to like to whatever decimal resolution, that is fine, that is not a big deal. But the main point is that you have to understand that it can take decimal values. Apart from that, absolute length, I already said that it is a good practice to use rem or em. In fact, always try to, some people always use rem, because again em is confusing, you understand that some people will always use rem, and at some places they will use pixel because it is handy, you understand. So right now when I was saying that, you know what, I want my height somewhat big, right? So I was writing something like, let's say 80 pixel I wrote, right? Why I was writing pixel? Because pixel is like, you understand, like 16 is this much, and then this is going to be this much. In writing rem, you might need some computation. So if it is not accurate, you just are doing some debugging or something, then having a simple 100 pixel, 200 pixel, and just that is like fine, you understand. So pixel is also very popular, but rem is like, you should be trying to use wherever possible. And em is actually, I told you that it depends on the current font size, and that's why use em only when you understand how you are doing that, and some places it is helpful. Rather than using rem, I will use em because I want to take that whatever is happening, that it depends on the font size. Let's say I want to take advantage of that. Let's say I am trying to create some UI component where I pass one attribute that 40, and everything changes accordingly. And let's say I am 40, I am doing 80, then everything changes accordingly. Then within that block of UI, if I use em, then I know that automatically it will be scaled. You understand? So you have to understand what it is doing, and if that is exactly what you want, then you can take best advantage of it, and that, in fact, this will be more useful at that point of time. But in general, people should use rem and somewhere pixels. Okay, so that should be all for some basic introduction to CSS. We'll start looking at some other advanced things and some more properties of CSS in the later videos. This will be all for now. See you in the next video.